All right. Hey guys, my name is Pranav and I'm currently a medical student, and I decided to go over some disease pathologies and try to explain it in a more simplistic manner, mainly for myself. I want to practice the Richard Feynman technique and try to explain very complex topics in simpler manners, because filling in details is just a lot easier than understanding the big picture. So I want to make sure I understand it, and hopefully this can help people too. So I decided to start making YouTube about it. We're going to start off with cystic fibrosis. So what is cystic fibrosis, right? Let's start with that. So cystic fibrosis, I should probably write this down first. Cystic fibrosis is mainly a respiratory problem, so it's going to mainly affect the lungs. But it also does have some effect on the digestive system, like the pancreas, as well as some effects on the skin as well. But it's primarily a lung issue. I drew a little bit of a pan and a sink, kind of, or attempted pan and attempted sink, in order to explain the big picture of cystic fibrosis. So the big idea is that you have a lot of buildup of mucus, or basically gunk is what I like to say, in your lungs, and this gunk can't properly be cleaned out. And so this gunk or mucus gets a lot thicker, and the thicker it becomes, it allows for bacteria and infections to survive better, because bacteria like to eat that gunk and survive. So you are really susceptible to respiratory infections, and you get sick pretty often. And respiratory infections, they start attacking the lung as well. So your lungs become weaker, and this basically continues to damage the lungs. And since you have a lot of lung damage, over time it becomes harder and harder for you to breathe, which is why a lot of people end up passing away from some type of respiratory problem around like they're 35 years old onwards. So people generally don't make it past 45 to 50 if they have been diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. How do you get cystic fibrosis? It's actually an autosomal recessive disorder, which means that it's something to do with family, and it's not based on whether you're a male or a female. It can be either of the sexes, and it's normally due to a mutation in what's called the CFTR channel, which is basically chloride. It's a channel that pumps out chloride. So now in this example, I drew on this little pan a lot of mucus here, right? So normally, how would mucus get cleaned out, or how would like a gunk on a pan get cleaned out? After you've been cooking for a long time, you know that you have a lot of that burnt residue or just some leftovers that get stuck if you don't properly take it out with water immediately, right? It gets stuck. And even then, when you put water the first time, it doesn't clear away right away. So you got to put in water a few times sometimes. And so you have this buildup of gunk, and you need water to get rid of it. In the lungs, it's actually similar. You're going to be needing to get rid of this mucus that forms pretty quickly, because over time, it just becomes thicker and thicker, right? You want to wash it away and start building new mucus. Why do we even have mucus? Mucus is supposed to protect us from all those icky things that we breathe in. Air is not always clean, right? They can have a lot of bad things in it, like bacteria or like little aerosols of things that we're not supposed to breathe in. But our lungs do a really good job with this mucus of trapping that to make sure they don't do any further damage. But again, it's basically like, it's kind of like a product that you need to keep replacing to make sure it's working well. Like, it doesn't last forever. You got to keep making new mucus. But in cystic fibrosis, how do you break this down, right? So normally when you have this buildup of mucus, you have water that's going to wash out and break this mucus, so then your cells can make new and better mucus. So you keep doing this, so you start cleaning up this mucus basically. So in a normal working channel, what happens is you're going to have chloride that basically goes from the lungs to the mucus side. In cystic fibrosis, this mutation causes the channel that does this to be misfolded or not properly taken to the membrane. There's different types. Essentially, you no longer have this channel that's functioning. Chloride normally is supposed to go to the mucus side, and sodium slowly starts going to the lung side. But when you have a lot of chloride built up here, the sodium decides that, hey, I like this negative charge, so this channel works slower, and you have a lot more sodium build up here. That's what's supposed to happen. And why is this important? Well, if you have a lot of sodium and chloride, you have salt, right? Water generally follows where salt goes. And so water basically is going to start following wherever there's a charge. It's not actually salt, but that's how I remember it. You have a lot of water that starts flowing here and it starts breaking up this mucus, right? But now in cystic fibrosis, the channel is not working properly. So chloride is stuck here, which means you're going to have a lot more sodium that goes to be with the chloride, because charge likes charge. Positive likes negative. And if you have a lot of sodium here now that starts going in, and you have a lot of chloride here, let's use a different color. You have a lot of chloride here. What's going to happen is the water's going to actually, there's going to be more water in this direction now. So that means the mucus is not being broken down. So you have a lot more mucus, which means that when you're breathing things in, you're going to have a lot more, we'll use red for the bad guys. We have a lot more trapping of like bacteria and like foreign things basically in this mucus, and it's getting thicker and it's not being properly washed away, which is bad because bacteria likes to thrive on that, and it starts damaging the lungs eventually when it starts getting a lot. And so this basically leads to a lot of respiratory infections, like I mentioned, which can start damaging the lungs. So this is bad. It also has some digestive properties that I mentioned. It's the same concept, except this is happening within something like the pancreas, and you have this gunk built in within the pancreas, and so you can't properly make pancreatic enzymes, which are important for making things like bile, for example, that help emulsify like fats. And so you're not getting proper fat reabsorption like you want to. And if you're not properly absorbing the fat, what are you going to do? You're going to poop it out, right? So you're going to have really fatty stools. So that's the primary way it affects the lungs as well as the digestive system. It also has some effects on the skin, which it actually does the opposite. And I'm going to use a different color. I'm going to use this color for this. So in the lungs, I mentioned how chloride would normally go toward the mucus side, right? So we're going to change the names here. We're going to do the outside or the skin, and we'll do the inside basically. So further inside of our body, we'll do inside. So in this, actually, the skin is a little confusing because it's doing the opposite. So instead of chloride going this way, it's actually going to be going this way. So now what happens if this is not working? You're going to have chloride built up around the skin instead, right? And you're going to have a lot of sodium that's built up around the skin as well because it's going to want to stay. So what's going to happen now is you're going to essentially take in water up toward the skin this time. And so you're going to have, like, when you start sweating, you're going to notice this with salty skin and salty, like salty water toward the skin if you induce sweating, which is commonly how you can actually diagnose cystic fibrosis, because having salty water or like salty sweat and salty skin is not normal, as you know. Maybe some people, but it's generally not normal. So it's a good way to diagnose cystic fibrosis. So now how do you kind of clean up this gunk in this pan and really help clean your dishes, similar to lead to allowing you to make this channel work properly and get that mucus out, right? That gunk out. There's a few drugs that can help with this. Like generally they're drugs with kaffir in it. That's the way I remember it. And there's two of them that are commonly used, lumakaffir and ivacaftor. So ivacaftor basically helps this channel function better. So the way I like to remember it is it essentially helps the water flow more. So it's essentially making what's broken work better. Now lumakaffir does something a little bit different. It actually helps, it essentially helps make more of a functional channel. So you're going to have less misfolded and more normal channels. So that's the job of it. So the way I like to remember that is essentially you're not using a faulty faucet. You're using a better faucet. So that's what this drug does. This was a super rough overview on cystic fibrosis. If there's mistakes or something I could have explained better, please let me know. I'm doing this for myself as much as I am doing it for other people. And yeah, that's my video on cystic fibrosis. Thanks for tuning in, guys.